Okay. Hello, my name is Alan Zeckelman, and I am the chairman of the board of directors of the American Friends of Bar-Ilan University. I'm honored to be a supporter of Bar-Ilan, a unique and outstanding institution of higher learning in Israel. Its excellence in sciences and the humanities is well known. Among BIU's many distinctions is the fact that it is the only institution of higher learning in Israel that is anchored in Jewish values. I am proud to be associated with its contributions to Israel and the Jewish community. I'm delighted to welcome you to a very special event featuring two highly accomplished members of our community. Senator Joseph Lieberman served with distinction and honor as a United States Senator from Connecticut from 1989 to 2013. He was also the first person of Jewish background to run on a major political party's presidential ticket. In 2008, Senator Lieberman received the U.S. Senator John Heinz Award for Greatest Public Service by an elected or appointed official. He was also the recipient of the American Patriot Award. A prolific author, Senator Lieberman's past works have included The Scorpion and the Tarantula, In Praise of Public Life, and The Gift of Rest, Rediscovering the Beauty of the Sabbath. Most recently, he collaborated with our other esteemed guest, Rabbi Ari Kahn, on today's topic, With Liberty and Justice, the 50-Day Journey from Egypt to Sinai. Rabbi Ari Kahn received his rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University's Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Theological Seminary. He is director of foreign student programs at Bar-Ilan University in Israel, where he is also a senior lecturer in Jewish studies. A renowned speaker and lecturer, Rabbi Kahn is the author of Explorations, a weekly in-depth analysis of the Torah readings. Other writings include Emanations, an extensive analysis of the Jewish holidays, and a new series, Echoes of Eden. We will have a few minutes for questions at the end of our program. Please enter your questions into the chat area for this conference. And now, it is with great pleasure that I present to you Senator Lieberman and Rabbi Kahn, co-authors of With Liberty and Justice.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, Rabbi Ari Kahn. How do you want to proceed?
Well, I think we could tell them a little about the book. I'm going to start by making it say, like, we worked on this together. The book was Senator Lieberman's idea. It was a dream that he had, and I was very blessed to be able to work together with him. And I'm going to say one thing about that, and then he's going to jump in at any point that he wants. But part of the idea is that everybody knows about Passover, and lots of Jews, unfortunately, didn't know that much about the holiday of Shavuot, and part of that was receiving the Torah. And part of receiving the Torah is learning Torah. And part of the way we learn Torah is that sometimes we have what's called a chavrusa, where two people sit and learn together. And this book is the result of our chavrusa. And it's a book which I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I could not have written by myself. I'm not sure if you could have written it by yourself. And it emerged by having the collective thoughts, experiences, ideas, and really this collaboration, I think, is very holy and very special.
Thanks, Rabbi. I appreciate what you said, and I totally agree. I had the same feelings myself. I'll give a little quick history about how I came to write this. So years ago, probably 2012 or 13, I published a book on Shabbat called The Gift of Rest. And that book was inspired by Rabbi Menachem Genak, who is a leader of the OU, Orthodox Union of Orthodox Congregations, rabbis. And a teacher and a friend of mine urged me to, from the perspective of a layperson, to write about why I observed Shabbat and what it meant to me. And I was very grateful that he motivated me to do that, and I am grateful that I was able to do it. So he said, "What's next?" And he was nudging me to write a book about Pesach. And so I kept saying to him, "Rabbi, the last thing the Jewish world, let alone the world, needs is another book about Pesach. There's so many. I don't know what I would add really, but what about Shavuot? I always feel Shavuot is lost and forgotten. Pesach is, by all surveys the most observed Jewish holiday in the year, observed in various ways, some quite halachically true and some not, but really observed. It has a big effect on the Jewish and non-Jewish world. And I said, in some ways, Shavuot may be the least observed of the Chagim. And it's wrong. To me, it seems wrong. One, what happened, what Shavuot reminds us of is the progression from Yetziat Mitzrayim, from the Exodus from Egypt, to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, the Ten Commandments, our mission statement. That's where we became a nation, and the Torah have added so much to the world, the Jewish world, and the non-Jewish world in terms of systems of law, rule of law, the Western ideal of the rule of law, and beyond the West. So I finally convinced him that we should do that, and he knew that in the previous books that I'd done, not my first books, which I did alone, but one that I did for about public service and praise of public service, where the publisher, Simon & Schuster, said, you must have a collaborator. And I said, oh, no, I love to write. I don't want a collaborator. Oh, no, you must. We insist on it. We've dealt with people like you, and if you don't have a collaborator, you won't get it done. So I said, okay, how about my press secretary? He knows me and he's a good writer. Oh, no, he'll never. So they gave me a guy who was a perfectly nice guy, and I kind of wrestled with him because for control of the book, you might say, although he was lovely, and the book came out very well and sold well. So I've had that kind of ambivalent feeling toward people who collaborated with me, but I did come to the conclusion that it's good to have a collaborator. And when I wrote the Shabbat book, I did have a collaborator, and I remember it was more a writer, but he was religiously observant, didn't have smicha, but very learned. And I remember writing in that book what I also write in this one with Kahn, which is that I'm writing as a layperson. I'm not a rabbi, and that both gives me a certain latitude to say things without the responsibility that comes with being a rabbi, but also means that I may not be as informed as I should be. And I love what Kahn said. It was really, but let me just say that, and I matured over time, and I got on better with my collaborators. But the best relationship I've had, and I think this is my 8th book with a collaborator, was with Rabbi Kahn, because I think we did have Rusa, really. And I take responsibility for everything written in the book. I couldn't have written it with as much content as it had if I did not have Rabbi Kahn as a collaborator. And I'm very grateful for that. But also, really, I came away with a great feeling of respect and fondness for him, and no mixed feelings. So anyway, that's how it happened. This so far has not been the best selling of our books, but I really think it makes a point, and maybe over time it will be discovered. I hope we don't have to wait as long as Van Gogh did for paintings too. But okay, that's how we got together, and that's how we wrote the book.
But if you really think about it, the experiences the two of us have had in terms of, you have an Ivy League education and law school, and then your years in Washington and years in public service, the people that you've met. I mean, the people who've made their way into the book, from Martin Luther King to presidents and Supreme Court justices and so on. And then on the other hand, completely different world, as it were, the people that I've been privileged to study with and to take Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Lichtenstein, and others, and to take their wisdom and to bring it into this as well. That's why I'm saying that the book that emerged was something which is so rich because it takes those two experiences, as a good chavrusa does, and melds it together, where the final result is greater than the parts which created it.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's what I'm so proud of. So we organized the book in a way that I thought made sense, which is we have a introduction, and then a little section, a page, 2 pages, is maybe plus 4 each day of the counting of the Omer. Some of them are fully, you might say, theological or halachic or textual. Others really, as Ari said, give me an opportunity to try to.
Right.
Somebody should mute their phone.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay, but we'll take questions later, though. But of course, it would be a Jewish gathering, and it would be like a Beit Midrash if there was noise in the background for our Harus. Anyway, that's the way we organized it. And but I want to repeat what you said, Ari, because it's a good point. I could not have written this book without the way it came out, without your help, and I'm very proud of the way it came out. I must say that this this counting of the Omer, this Spirit Omer, I followed through the book. I haven't done that since the time it came out, which I guess is 3 years ago. And I was proud that we did the book, and I think we did something good. And so hopefully more people will read it. More people will be drawn to count the Omer and to appreciate Shavuot, but also to appreciate the obviously central role that what happened at Har Sinai has had to the Jewish people, and to the rule of law in the world since then. A lot of it started there, and other religions have really adopted really a lot of them have adopted the 2 other monotheistic religions to one extent or another have adopted the Torah, but clearly and explicitly adopted the 10 Commandments and the values in them, which all came from Sinai, which we celebrate on Shavuot. So I'm proud we did. I love the holiday, and I hope more and more people get to read the book.
You know, on this part of the world, the sun is already setting, and it's becoming Rosh Chodesh. And as was mentioned before, Rosh Chodesh is when the Jews, the first day of the Jewish month, of the lunar month, it's when the Jews arrived at Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai, one of the comments that Rashi cites is that there was a moment of unity. That many times we fought as a people, but that moment where there was unity. You know, one of the things we say on Passover night is, had we arrived at Mount Sinai and not received the Torah, dayenu, it would have been enough. And I've always found that perplexing. I mean, there are lots of mountains out there. What value could there have been to arrive at this mountain and not receive the Torah? But I think that's the answer. I think it's that sense of unity that we had. And I think one of the most intriguing chapters in the book was entitled Unity but Not Uniformity.
Right.
Where we are people that need desperately to be able to be one people, to be unified, even if we all don't have the same thoughts and have the same exact way of looking at things. And I think that message was really particularly important.
Well, I agree with you. And of course, from my perspective, somebody who's been involved in government politics, it's always been important. Unity and not uniformity. It would be in a free society, which we favor in Jewish history, and the whole Yetziat Mitzrayim, the liberation from slavery, celebrates freedom, our birthright, if you will. You're not going to have uniformity, and you shouldn't have of opinion. But unity is a real precondition of a civilized society. And of course, this is we talk about this in the book, that there are tremendous values, not only in what was given by God, Hashem, to Bnei Israel, children of Israel at Har Sinai, the Torah, but then the development of the Torah in the Talmud, etc., which occurred through discussion, debate, disputation, but hopefully not ever disrupting unity. And in that unity is strength. This is a very powerful message today in America, to some extent, I say respectfully, in Israel, to people in politics. And here in America, I'll just say, because I'm closer to it, we've got to again find a way to have differences of opinion without dividing into tribes that seem to be at war with each other. And that's the way too much of American politics seems today. In the farewell address of President George Washington, our first president, and he being part of that founders of America who really they were Calvinists, most of them. They really embraced the Hebrew Bible. They felt, as I'm sure many of you know, and they said this, that their coming to America from England was like the children of Israel coming from Egypt or coming from elsewhere to the Holy Land, to Eretz Yisrael. They refer to America as the New Jerusalem, but Washington said two things that are relevant to what we're talking about now in his farewell address, which we should be so lucky with our book here, Ari, but it still reads very well more than 200 years after he gave it. And one of the points he made first was, and I paraphrase, where he said about the role of religion in a society, don't indulge the supposition, I think is the way he said it, that America can be a good society without the power of religion. And I think he meant there that this goes to the limits of the rule of law, that in a society where the law, which is free, where the law will not tell people to do it every minute of every day, you need other sources of motivation for good behavior, and religion is one of them. But the second point really related to your important point about unity and uniformity, Dayenu. He says that he already sees evidence that some of the members of the new American government are giving greater loyalty to their faction, political faction or party, than they are to the country. And he uses exactly these words. He said, if we don't maintain our unity, we will never maintain our independence. Now, that was the early days of American history, so they were really worried about whether they'd remain independent. But that's the point, that ultimately we have to be committed to something higher than our parochial loyalties. We have to disagree without dividing, and that really is one of the messages, not only from Har Sinai, but from the whole development of our religious narrative since then, which we try to embrace in our book, With Liberty and Justice.
One of the heroes of Jewish history who made his way into the book as well is Hillel. And Hillel, of course, was very famous for having a school, but having a protagonist, not an antagonist, but a protagonist in Shammai, in the school of Shammai. And one of the remarkable things the Talmud says is that when Hillel would teach his students, he taught both the opinions, his own opinion and Shammai's opinion, and he taught Shammai's opinions first. And that's the reason why the law was established like him. If you think about it for a second, when we study Talmud, and it's one of our suggestions at the end of the book is for people to get involved in all and any kind of learning which they really feel a connection to. But how much of the Talmud are laws or opinions that we don't accept? Because the Talmud made a point of bringing diverse opinions. And there's value in studying something which is not necessarily going to be the law and something which we don't necessarily agree with, because it makes us broader, it makes us smarter. And it makes us people who are able to, I think in a much better way. And to realize that that was the clinching argument why Hillel was accepted more than the school of Shammai, because he taught Shammai's opinion and Hillel couldn't. I think that there's a message in that which is incredibly important for today.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, today in American politics, too often we see the opposite, which is if a member of one party says, the sky is blue, the member of the other party will say, oh, no, it's cloudy or it's red. It's very, very divisive. Whereas the whole history of the development, both of Jewish law, but of secular law in a country like America, involves debate and disputation. I mean, for instance, the system of law that we created, and you could track it probably from our Sinai into Europe and the Anglo-Saxon system of law that then came to the US. But what's the premise? That both sides in a legal case, first of all, if there's a dispute and you can't resolve it through mediation or discussion yourselves, you go to court. And the judge is a neutral arbiter and listen, or the jury, and they hear arguments of both sides and decide. What is quite remarkable, and we talk about it in the book, is the extent to which in our society, America, Israel, rule of law societies, even if you lose the litigation, you may be angry. And I use the example of the litigation about the voting in Florida during the 2000 election. Ultimately, you've got to accept the result of the highest court, even if you disagree with it, because that's the system of justice we have. And I won't tell you all the stories, but we actually have a great story from Talmud there about a disputation in which Hashem enters the argument on behalf of one of the members of the Sanhedrin, I guess. And this, I think Ari gave me this one. It was a great one. And the court says, we're responsible for making the laws. It's not made in heaven. So we're going with the majority opinion. And in a way, I said, that's what Al Gore decided in 2000. We thought that final decision of the Supreme Court was really unfair and not based on legal precedent. But, at some point you have to say what's more important is the continuity of our government, the respect for the system of law, and the power of a thoughtful majority, in that case, 5 members of the Supreme Court, to have the last word. So it's a really good point that comes from Hillel exposing his students to both sides of the argument.
Correct. Yeah, that was the same idea was expressed in the 13th century or so by an anonymous author in a book called the Sefer HaChinuch, where he says, sometimes we're going to follow an opinion which is wrong, but it's the majority, because it's better to have the occasional mistake than have anarchy. And again, it's right.
Right. And I don't want to get into American politics, but we've come fairly close to anarchy over the last several months here. I don't want to overstate it. There were at least people challenging the system of law. Never became anarchy, thank God, because Americans are so rooted to it. But it was a more frontal attack on that Sefer's wisdom, if you will, and the wisdom of the founders of our country, who created the Supreme Court and the 3 branches of our government. But I think we've resisted it, and though it lingers a bit, we're moving on.
So I think that the main, I don't want to say the main, but the core of the book, when it comes down to it, is something which is connected to the Shavuot holidays, the 10 Commandments. So one of the things I was thinking about, it's very hard to take all of Judaism and reduce it into 10. And then it's probably even harder to take the 10 and reduce it even less. Of the 10 Commandments, do you think that over time, they've always been just as important? What I mean by that is Do you think at different times in history, different ones have different importance?
Good question. Well, probably at different times in the history of different societies, some of the thou shalt nots have been more violated than at other times. Theft, perhaps even adultery, murder. But you know, the construct of the Ten Commandments is so powerful, and that's eternal, which is it begins as no other legal system I know, with a pretty strong foundation, which is, you know, I'm the Lord your God, and this is all coming from Hashem. So it creates a respect for the system, the foundation of the system. And these 10 overall really summarized so much that's natural in human behavior and where we need to be guided by law. I mean, part of what we say, Ari, in the book, and the rabbis have taught us this, is that, you know, well, here's the point, that Yetziat Mitzrayim, Exodus, the liberation of the Jews from Egypt, wasn't just to take them out to the Midbar, to the desert, and let them roam free. And it wasn't to stay in Egypt to be free and equal Egyptians. Part of it was to go to Mount Sinai to get the law. And part of that is a statement, I think, this is not my thought, I learned it from my rabbis, which was that without law, if you imagine that Bnei Yisrael would be left in the Midbar, in the desert, or in Egypt, they would assimilate and disappear. In the desert, they would fall prey to violence, immorality, perhaps self-destruction. But the law creates rules. It embraces our aspirations for what we would like to be and are not always, and not usually. And that's a really important point of the book.
Yeah. See, it's interesting that Moses receives his mandate when he gets to the burning bush. And at that point, God actually says to him two different destinations. One destination is to take the Jews to the promised land. The other destination is to take them to Mount Sinai. And we have been a people ever since then with this dual destination. Because had we just gone to the land of Israel without stopping at Sinai, we really would have been a nation like all other nations, and we would have figured things out on our own. And had we only gone to Sinai and not been given a land, then we would have been a religion, but there would not have been a national identity. And it's fascinating that this holiday, and that's really what connects it with Passover as well. Because Passover, the liberation, as you just now said, it's not enough just that we got out, and now what? But we're people with dual destinations. And sometimes that's complicated, sometimes it's difficult. And I think that for some Jews, it's easier to only focus on the religion and not the national. And for some, it's easier to focus on the national and not to focus on the religion. And our burden is a dual burden in order to understand, and I say burden not in a negative way, it's in a way with great pride. And I think that really is also part of this message, that we are a people with both aspects that we walk with us constantly.
It's an excellent point. It also, I apologize, I'm having my worst year with allergies that I've ever had. And but before I settled in New York, I didn't think I had allergies, but somehow. So it also reminds me of this point, that the Jewish people and the Jewish nation are quite unique in that we embraced our national values, were given them at Har Sinai and accepted them and said Na'aseh v'nishma before we had our land. And that's usually not the case. Normally, people settle a land and then they decide what their constitution is going to be. In fact, the American experience is close to that, but not the same. because the people who settled America, after the Native Americans who were here first, but the ones who came from England beginning in the 17th century, had a vision, and they had values, which were very much, as I said a while ago, affiliated with and caused by, source in the Hebrew Bible and the Ten Commandments. But still, it was different because they came here first and then adopted a constitution. The Jewish people were different. So when they got to Eretz Yisrael, they already had a constitution, if you will. And the mission of the Jewish people since then has been to try to realize the aspirations expressed in the Ten Commandments and the Torah that was given and received at Har Sinai. Yeah. So your point is a very good one.
Yeah, we're getting some questions here about the title of the book, from With Liberty and Justice. So I'll mention about the title, but I want to go back to something that you said. Obviously, liberty is about leaving Egypt, and justice is about Mount Sinai. But when you mentioned God in the first of the Ten Commandments before, God actually had a number of opening lines. You know, we think about that elevator pitch today. What can I say in 15 seconds? God could have said, I'm God who created heaven and earth. But God instead said, I'm God who took you out of Egypt. And there's so much in that statement. It's understanding. It's saying, I know you were in Egypt. I know that you were disenfranchised. I know the pain that you went through. And it, in a sense, creates this, you know, again, this justice part of the title in this way of not necessarily this absolute, God, I'm God who made heaven and earth. I'm God who knows what it was like for you to experience. And the laws which I'm going to give you, so many of them are about the Egyptian experience and about the disenfranchised and about the pain that people have and about the downtrodden and how we have a responsibility of reaching out to them and making this world a better place.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's a really strong point. I have nothing really to add, but it's good to say that too occasionally. But I agree. We're very lucky in that way as a people.
So I can see that Rabbi Kahn is monitoring the chats, and
yes.
There have been a few questions that have come in. A couple of them you've sort of answered already. One question that just came in was, at the time of Mount Sinai, the Jewish people accepted the Ten Commandments with blind faith. Na'aseh v'nishma, I guess. Do we still today have a degree of blind faith in our Jewish observance? That's a deep question, perhaps, but let's see what the rabbi or maybe Senator Lieberman has to say about that question.
That sounds very theological, so I'll let the rabbi start.
So you're punting. So I'll tell you something. It's interesting. That question is built upon the most famous commentary, who's Rashi. And because if you actually look at the sequence in the Torah, the Na'aseh v'nishma, right? Na'aseh, we will do, v'nishma, we will hear. That's in chapter 24. The Ten Commandments are actually back in chapter 20. And Rashi has to juggle a bit to claim that we said it before we heard it. So for Rashi, it was very important to make that point about blind faith. Others, for example, there's the commentary of the Ramban, Nachmanides, he says, no, they already heard the Ten Commandments. They already heard chapters 21, 22, 23. And then nonetheless, they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. So in a certain sense, there's a real big difference. By the way, there's a third opinion, which was found from the larger Tosfot school, which is he's called the Chizkuni. And he claims that not only did they get the Ten Commandments and what we call Parshat Mishpatim, all of the interpersonal laws, they also got this last week's Parsha, Bechukotai, which is all of the terrible things that will happen if you don't keep the law. So I just want to now frame it like this. For Rashi, this question really resonates. That Rashi felt there needs to, you know what, it's sort of like a marriage. When we're very young, we really don't know what we're getting ourselves into. And we have this, I don't know if we should use the Kierkegaard term of a leap of faith. It's really a leap of love, because we really trust and believe in the other person, But there is this unknowing which takes place, and that's a part of it. According to the Ramban, we're going into it, but we read the Ksuva carefully. We know exactly what it is that we're going to obligated to perhaps pay. While the Chizkuni is saying that we have a prenup, which, by the way, is a very good idea for the Jewish community. We have a prenup with all the details in it, and it says what's going to happen if you don't follow the laws over here precisely. And it's interesting. One is very romantic and the other is very, very practical. And I love within our tradition, we have that dialogue taking place because I think it's important. But a religion that doesn't have faith, a religion that everything's understandable, is not really a religion. We need that aspect of it in our lives. And none of us understand everything. There are things that we do simply because God asked us to do it. And there are other things that we work so hard to understand. And we really need that combination.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the Nasav and Ishma, of course, that generation saw the miracles that God worked, both in Yetziat Mitzrayim and at the Red Sea separation, and at Har Sinai with all the lights and sounds. But the word faith, it means to believe in Hashem, but it also means that you have, as Ari said, you take a leap of faith because understanding everything is beyond us. I mean, I have known people in my life who have been devout Jews, believers in God, and they're and they were rational people, so they wanted rationally to believe that the source of their faith was beyond the leap. So they based their faith, interestingly, on the miraculous survival of the Jewish people for all these millennia, and therefore I remember one man I was close to said to me, "Well, how could we still exist if there were not a God?" Which, in his way, was validating the whole Torah story. With love, God chose us with love and gave us a mission. I do want to say something that is just thought about the other day, and this goes back to what Rabbi Kahn answered on the last question. And it goes to this one too. On Yom Yerushalayim, just Monday of this week. So I was reading some texts, and this both Rav Soloveitchik and Rabbi Sachs, and this feeling that we are also living in a time of miracles, and the reestablishment of the state of Israel and the various steps. Rav Soloveitchik beautifully brings up sections of Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, and the knock at the door. And what were the various knocks at the door? Some of them are quite worldly, like the political organization that led in any way. But also in 1967, when the Israeli troops took back Yerushalayim. So we a lot of Jews, including myself, feel that, of course, this is a classic dynamic between God and the Jewish people. It's part of our history. God created, God gave us the law, God gave us capability, but we're the partners here. We it's not like that great moment at the Yam Suf at the Red Sea where Hashem, by my translation, says, okay, it's not time to daven and appeal to me. It's time to act. Moshe holds the stick up, Nachshon goes into the water, and then the waters separate. And so obviously without the courage, the bravery of the people who led the Zionist movement from the time of Herzl to the founding of the state, to the brave soldiers of the IDF, that all led to Yom Yerushalayim. But what a miracle, really. And it ought to be a source of emunah. And so when today, in different ways, we each in our own way are called on to say Nasav and Ishma, okay, I will do it. And then we'll debate it, but first I'll do it, what you want. there's plenty of reason in our history right now to justify that emunah, that faith.
Well, there are a couple more questions lingering in the chat. Lonnie asked a question earlier that I think was largely answered because we explained the connection between Shavuot, getting the laws, and then actually getting a place, Israel. Nina asked the question of Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and how is it different from other study nights? But in particular, if everyone on the call is familiar, I'm assuming they are, that we're staying up all night before Shavuot. And I'm assuming we're staying up because we're just Jewish people couldn't sleep. How can you sleep when you're about to receive the Torah? But maybe somebody can talk about that whole culmination of you counted the Omer for 49 days. You went up one little level each day, and there was the Hasidim have different ways of thinking about each one of those days in a special way, but how can we all sort of experience the energy of Shavuot? Is the best way to participate in Tikkun Leil Shavuot, perhaps, or maybe say something about it? Because I think it's a great tradition and thing. I don't know who would best be able to address it.
I'm happy to respond. A number of years ago, there was a professor in Bar-Ilan University, Elliot Horowitz, who passed away a couple of years ago. Elliot was actually a mentor of mine when I was a very young person. He was my madrich in camp, my counselor in camp. And Elliot wrote an article about Tikkun Leil Shavuot and various nocturnal customs. And he actually pointed out the most fascinating thing, that all of the night customs that we have did not pick up and were not practiced until caffeine made it to different Jewish communities. So he wrote a wonderful article. Senator Lieberman, if you like, I'll send you the article to look at. And it was actually never underestimate the caffeine, even in Jewish practice. The idea of the Tikkun Leil was that there is this teaching that the Jews fell asleep and missed the opportunity, and therefore we're going to stay awake and we're not going to miss an opportunity this time. But as far as how to get the most out of Shavuot, I don't want to guilt anybody saying, no, you must stay up all night. I think it depends on who you are, where you are, how old you are, what kind of classes are going on. Is it going to help? Ironically, during the years that I would stay up late, I would actually learn less on that holiday than almost any other holiday, because it completely ruins the day. And even at this point, I'm going to, Lee Neder hopefully teach from around 11 o'clock till 4 o'clock. I'm going to teach straight. In my community, I'm a rabbi. And at 4 o'clock, I'm going to go to sleep until 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and then go to a later minyan, because I can't pray without getting some kind of rest. And I know people will be so disappointed that I'll do that. But I'm not that young anymore, and I don't have that same energy as some of my students do. I mean, for them, they've been practicing all year not sleeping. So Shavuot should be like the easiest time for them imaginable. But I think what it really is that there's lots of different types of learning experiences and Jewish experiences. And it's not a question of one size fits all. And I think people need to give a little bit of thought to that. Maybe think about the right text or the right class and what they connect to, and then use that on that night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That's a great answer. And it's a very wise and merciful answer about not feeling social pressure to go to a tikkun that lasts all night. I've done it sometimes, as we say in the book. The most memorable for me was actually related to Bar-Ilan, which was on the occasion when I was honored really by the Guardian of Zion Award, which the Renner family gives, which always happens around Shavuot. I spent the tikkun with Ira Renner, was my friend, at Yeshivat Netiv Aryeh with Rav Aaron Bina, who's the leader, principal, Rosh Yeshiva, and my son-in-law, Daniel Lowenstein, who went there, is now with my daughter and made Aliyah. And it was, we learned all night. It was very exciting. And the big part of the excitement was that was to be there for Shachrit when the sun came up and to the Nativ Aryeh occupies a building that's right across from the Kotel. So we went out on the porch, the veranda, the Merpeset, and looked out. And honestly, politicians always overstate crowds. How many people were at your rally? 10,000. But to me, it looked like 10,000, at least, probably more, were there at dawn to daven. It was thrilling. Incidentally, we refer to something, and I'll try not to digress too much on this, but we have one chapter one day where we talk about the fact that somehow we mourn and restrict ourselves, and we know why, the students of Rabbi Akiva and all the rest, till Lag BaOmer. Tragically, this year we had an awful tragedy at Meron on Lag BaOmer. But I also say that in the modern time, we've had extraordinary things happen during the Sfirat Omer. I mean, the Declaration of Independence for Israel, 1948, May, occurred during the Omer. The Yom Yerushalayim, the taking of Jerusalem, occurred during the Omer. And then on Shavuot, the government of Israel opened the Kotel for the first time in 1967. And it was packed with all kinds of Israelis. And this goes back to Ari's statement earlier about unity, not uniformity. Somebody said, who was there, that it might have been the most unified gathering of Jews since Har Sinai. All range of people observing. So, okay, now I forgot what the main first question was. I got off on a sidetrack. This remind me, Ari. We were.
No, I just want to confirm what you just now said. We wrote this in the book. We wrote this in the book, and I spoke on Yom Yerushalayim a couple nights ago, and somebody in my shul came over to me and said, "I was there in 1967. That's the first day they opened it." And he said, walking through the streets, it was surreal. And just seeing all these people. And it happens every year. Who knows what's going on this year? I mean, this year, things are so strange right now. Yeah. But that experience of walking through the streets, it's like you're looking around and then you see people coming. It's like from the night of the living dead, suddenly all these people gather together, and it's really over 100,000 people who end up coming.
Yeah,
it's an enormous amount.
I wanted to say in a conclusion to this question, which is why I appreciate that you've taken the rabbinical pressure off people to stay up all night. As wonderful as it has been when I have stayed up all night, I've actually enjoyed it more when I've learned until after midnight sometime, then I go home and sleep. Because to me, the highlight really is at Shachri on Shavuot, when the Ten Commandments are recited, when the story of the receiving, the centerpiece of what we've been counting to get to, is reenacted by us. I mean, in some sense, as the rabbis say, that we have to imagine on Pesach that we were there and are there now for liberation from Sinai. So too, I always feel on that morning of Shavuot, we should feel as if we're receiving the Torah again, with all the Nasav and Ishma, with all the responsibilities and opportunities that come with that. Alan,
was the best part might be the cheesecake and the ice cream. I'm sorry.
No, back to you.
So there was a question asked by Bradford, and maybe it's a little out of sequence in our discussion. He says, like, you have this title of this book, Liberty and Justice. Where's the justice in Moshe Rabbeinu not making it into Eretz Yisrael? So maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. Part of it is going to be a cop-out, and that is that I have a full lecture on this, that if he wants my email, I'm happy to send him a recording of this. But and it's not a simple 1 second, one sentence theological explanation, but I'll say it in 2 sentences. One is all of us at some point in our lives end up having to surrender. None of us accomplish everything we want to accomplish. There is surrender. And even if the greatest Jew, Moshe, and we can argue that point about the greatest Jew, but certainly one of the top. I know they still argue about, where's Ron Solomon? They argue about LeBron and Michael Jordan. We'll have to talk about this later. But you can argue who the greatest Jew is, but Moshe is certainly there in the discussion, and he couldn't accomplish everything. So that tells us something. I gave a lecture around a year or two ago where I noted that where Moses is punished and told that he can't go in is the same portion that we read about the red heifer. And everyone understands that we don't understand the red heifer. But in a certain sense, I think there is an incredible parallel over there. There are certain things we don't understand, but there's another issue. And that is the Jewish people may not really have deserved to go in while Moshe did. And one of the things about the red heifer is he who is impure becomes pure, and he who's pure becomes impure. And part of that trade-off may have been exactly what happened. Because theoretically, the commentaries say if Moshe went in, he would have built the temple, the Beit HaMikdash immediately. And that temple never would have been destroyed. And if that's the case, then what would have happened to the Jewish people? This way, instead, God takes out his anger on a building, on the temple, but the Jewish people survive. But if Moshe would have gone in, that temple couldn't have been destroyed, and the Jewish people would have been at peril. So as I said, it's a deeper theological approach that I just gave you a drop of it. But it requires a little bit more evidence and a little bit more thought, but that's the direction that I would go.
Wow,
Yes.
Rabbi, you blew me away. I want that recording.
Happily.
That was a great answer. So I would just say, by way of the title itself, Liberty and Justice, this goes back to what we said earlier about Passover is the holiday of liberty. Hashem enters history again to liberate the Jewish people, both an expression of the continuing covenant and love Hashem has for the Jewish people, but really it's something substantive. The Jewish people are being enslaved. And God says, basically, you have a birthright to be free. This is part of why this story has been so broadly accepted, has motivated people who are Jewish to be leaders in fights for social justice, whether they were religious Jews or not. And of course, in so many examples, most significantly, in the civil rights movement in the United States, the story has been a motivator for action. But the point of the book is that Pesach is incomplete. And if you just had liberty, as I said before, you could have chaos or worse. And that's where the justice comes in, which is what Shavuot is about. So you ultimately, because of God's grace to us, we combine both. I will say very briefly about Moshe. And obviously, there's a lot. I mean, part of the wonder of our religion and our belief in unity, but not uniformity, that beginning with Avraham Avinu, we sometimes argue with Hashem. Why were you so tough on Moshe? And one of the answers that I heard early on, and maybe it appealed to me because I was on my way into public life, was that both by the story of Moshe, also Shaul, when he doesn't follow the dictates of Shmuel and loses his kingship, and the children of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, that when you have the higher the position you have in society, the greater the responsibility you have to behave appropriately, because ethically, morally, because if you don't, or in Moshe's case with discipline, if you don't, the impact on the society is all the greater, because you're the leader, you're the role model. And I agree, it always seemed just heartbreakingly unfair to Moshe Rabbeinu, and yet Hashem has the last word, as we all know.
You know, Senator, my conclusion from all this is we need to find some more time that we can learn together, either with people listening or not. We should spend some more time doing this.
Yeah, I agree. This could be like a rabbi and a former senator walk into a bar.
That would be good as well.
Well, I don't finish it now, but it would be a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you again and to learn from you. I appreciate it.
So we probably have time for one more question, maybe two. I don't see any in the chat, but if a single person wants to unmute and ask a verbal question, I think we can let that happen. Although if 5 people do it at once, it'll be confusing. If there's somebody with a pressing question, please go ahead and ask it. I guess it's not a pressing question, but what I can tell you is that this has been incredibly enjoyable, and there's so much depth in this holiday that we've talked about already, and we are ramping up to it. This book is a book I have on order now on Amazon. It hasn't come yet, but I'm going to. I could have sworn I saw the cover. Somebody may have given it to me, but it may be in my home in Michigan. And I need to read it and elevate myself and my experience of Shavuot. And in the meantime, I want to thank you, Senator Lieberman and Rabbi Kahn, and thanks to everyone on the call today for joining us. The special webinar is part of a series in which we bring Bar-Ilan University and its supporters live to your homes and share with you cutting-edge research, scholarship, and critical innovations. I hope that you will join me in supporting Bar-Ilan, and to do so, you might want to try visiting afbiu.org/donate. Give a little tzedakah. It's always a good thing. I'm not going to discourage that. In fact, I'm going to encourage it. Your generous support is critical and deeply appreciated. And with that, I want to wish everyone a meaningful receiving of the Torah, Kabbalat Torah. You should do it with joy and with pnimiyut, I think the Hasidim like to say. And any last words from you, Rabbi or Senator?
I just feel so privileged. I see so many old friends over here. I'm not calling you old. I just know you guys a long time, and it's great. and it's great to see you. And the holiday is such a rich holiday. I'm going to say one more thing about the book. They're very short chapters. They can take somebody just to, really minutes to read, but they're very rich. You can read a chapter in 90 seconds and then have something to think about all day. And that was really, I sorry for saying it, but that's the brilliance of the book. Really doesn't take a lot of time to read, but gives a lot of food for thought. And that's really what we were trying to accomplish. And there's one more element to holiday, and that's the Book of Ruth, which we didn't get to at all. And taking in strangers and taking in people, and it's such an important part of our religion. But if you think about it, the Book of Ruth actually takes those two elements, the elements of somebody accepting the mitzvot, accepting the Torah, and the whole agricultural and land-based narrative is in the background. So it's such a perfect book for this holiday. And it's something which, it's just in case someone's going to say, well, that talk was okay, but they didn't mention Ruth at all. So we're going to mention Ruth.
Yeah, well done. I agree. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about in a few of the chapters, how for a long time, because of exile by the Jewish people from the land of Israel, we became more, with a few notable exceptions like Tevye, the milkman, we became an urban people. But once again, in Israel, we became agricultural. Now we're highly technological. The agricultural roots of Shavuot became much more relevant. And again, Ari, thanks for your collaboration with me, and thanks for all you contributed to the book. And I agree, it comes in morsels, and you can pick it up at a tikkun, or if you're not going to stay up all night on your own form of a tikkun, or on the day of Shavuot, read a couple and talk to your friends and family and Chavrus about it. So anyway, thank you to Bar-Ilan. I have great admiration for Bar-Ilan. My wife and I are privileged to be on the board of the American Friends of Bar-Ilan. And on her behalf and mine, I wish you all a Hag Sameach next Sunday night, Monday. And for those of us still wandering, Tuesday.
Oh, enjoy your blintzes.
Yes, you too.
Chodesh Tov, Chag Sameach.
Alan, before we leave, I think
do you have the next seminar?
We have for the next seminar, Lonnie.
Yes, Alan, thank you. And thank you to Senator Lieberman and to Rabbi Kahn. You did a tremendous job. Our next presentation will be taking place on June the 9th, and it will feature Hadassah Lieberman, who will be speaking about her new memoir, Hadassah, An American Story. I encourage you all to please pick up a copy of that book ahead of our presentation, and she will be interviewed by the journalist Miriam L. Wallach. So if you could join us on June the 9th, and that will be at 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and 7 p.m. in Israel. And thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Alan.
Thank you.